Everyone, welcome to one of our first workshops, or sorry, what was it called? Webinars with one of my favorite customers, VJ from Atomicwork. VJ is a 20-year veteran in the B2B SaaS and enterprise space. Right before starting Atomicworks, actually, he sold his startup to Minjar, his startup Minjar to Nutanix. He has many thoughts about automation in the workspace and just generally about the future of work in general. So I'd love to dive deeper into that with him. Very interesting story to share. And Atomicworks is a very exciting AI startup in the enterprise workflow and automation space. They're currently using Command R to power IT support use cases using tool use and RAG. So I'd love to introduce you to VJ.
Hey, great to be here, Ivan. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for joining us for this chat. Excited to be talking to all of you.
So VJ, I know you have a super interesting story, and you're a veteran in the startup space. Can you tell us a bit more about why entrepreneurship and what got you started?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I always like seeding things, as we spoke earlier, Ivan. So I thought being a founder gives you, a lot of opportunities to see a lot of new things, and super excited to be building. Previously built during the cloud era in early 2010s, and started Atomicwork in 2022. And super excited to be building in the AI era and doing a lot of interesting and new things. And being a founder gives you that optionality of trying to experiment and do things and scale and deliver impact both for customers and the team that believes in the mission.
Cool. And can you tell us a bit more about how Atomicworks started? Why this space? Why this problem? And why now?
No, I mean, great question. So I think me, Kiran, and Persu, when we started this company, we've been like, we thought about like a bunch of problems. I think we really deeply resonated with, our mission with which we started the company. Because when we previously built companies or started companies, we really enjoyed them when they were like 100 people and a couple of hundred people. And we probably didn't really enjoy, once this company scaled to a few thousand people, right? And one of the reason is, startups start and growth comes. In order to manage that growth, we set up processes, then we hire people to manage these processes, and that creates complexity, and that complexity creates joy out of work, right? So we really thought, is there an opportunity for us to, help reduce some of this complexity through a modern software, through a modern service management approach, using AI. And and we are so fortunate that this whole thing took off in 2022, late 2022. And I think it's super exciting time to be using technology to reduce some of the complexity at workplace.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, I mean, Cohere has grown quite a bit now, and so I'm seeing some of these complexities. So I'm curious, when you're looking at some of your the issues that your customers are facing, how do you pick which ones to prioritize and which ones AI can solve, for example?
Yeah. No, I think if you look at enterprises, right, there are certainly like three challenges most companies face as they grow from like few hundred people to few thousand people, right? The first thing is there is a lot of fragmentation of information, right? Because every team is using like a lot of different tools. Information is created, presentations are at one place, documents are at one place, knowledge bases are at one place. So truly helping people find information within the enterprise is like the first step, right? I think AI is like phenomenally good at doing advanced information retrieval, right? Especially through a RAG, kind of an architectural pattern in the enterprise context. So I think that's the first problem that we basically said, hey, we should help bring enterprise knowledge bases together, whether these knowledge bases are like traditional knowledge management systems, your Confluence, your SharePoint, your docs, to your modern knowledge bases like Notion and whatnot, right? So everybody in the company has access to the information that they are supposed to have access to, right? And today, like people have to go to too many places to find the information, right? Even like as a founders, we and as executives and leaders, we always want where is the latest presentation, right? And just before that customer call, and okay, who is the reference customer in this specific geo, and how do we quote, how do we onboard partners, what's the latest NDA to sign with a prospect before we jump on a call, and whatnot. I think finding information is like a first problem that the advanced information retrieval is like phenomenally a good problem that could be solved using AI. I think the second thing that we basically realized is when people reach out for help, traditionally what used to happen is you go raise a ticket, and some service team, whether it's from your IT or your HR, your finance, workplace support, then have to spend time to one, understand your intent of what you're asking for, and understand your context, right? Okay, who's this person? What's the impact of this request? And should I prioritize this? So essentially doing routing of requests to right teams and classifying them in a way that people can focus on most critical asks first, right? And the third thing is, how do you drive automation, right? Because traditionally, if you look at, somebody has to trigger the automation for the employee, when you reach out for a support, right? But can we essentially do a better reasoning and planning, using AI models, so that we can essentially trigger this automation, left shift a lot of that as a self-service, and also like identify the right intent, map them to right tools, and drive the right automation so that people are productive and they're not waiting for things to get work done, whether that is for themselves or to the work that they need to do for customers.
Wow, absolutely. And I think I really liked the part you said about automation. I guess my question is, given that, there's so many things to automate, and I think automation sort of manifests in everyone's minds like slightly differently about what that looks like. I'm curious how you think about automation and how, viewers should think about how they can automate some of their workflows.
So I think the way we look at this AI use cases, Ivan, is so there is internal AI and external AI, right? So the internal AI is as a company, how you can use AI to be productive for your own needs and use cases, and to solve problems for your employees, right? And then how do you use AI in your products and services so that you can help your end customers, right? Directly deliver that through your mobile app, your web app, or your client apps, right? So Atomicwork focuses on like internal AI kind of use cases. So in that context, if you look at what truly matters for businesses is one, how do we automate the most frequent things that people ask for, right? So what are the most frequent things people ask for? Access to software, access to reports, access to a specific documents, or they are essentially looking for access to their employment letters, or they're looking for access to resetting their password, or helping one of their team member unlock an account, right? Or having an issue with VPN. So in that context, we kind of segmented this into IT first approach. So we basically start with IT automations first, because if you look at like internal support, 40-50% of the tickets are around the technology and IT, right? And then we look at HR, and then we look at finance, and rest of the departments. So that's how at least we sequenced it from an Atomicwork standpoint. Again, in this automation, as I said, there are three levels of automation, right? There is information automation so that people can consume information in the right context. And two is, you can essentially, detect the intent and classify their asks and needs, so that people can tackle them, on priority. And third is, wherever there is a self-service automation that business has already enabled, right? Let's say today, if you want to go get your pay stub because some $100 got deducted extra, what do? You basically ask your HR business partner or a payroll support team saying, why that deduction happened. Then somebody goes and looks at it and says, oh, this is because of some insurance or change in some policy, or this deduction happened because of tax reason, right? State or local tax. So I think some of those automations exist in some companies, some automations don't exist. At least from our context, we start with IT automation first. So think of employee onboarding, offboarding, access to tools, troubleshooting most frequently, requested things. That's how we kind of started, and then we, enhanced it further to HR, then we enhanced it further to finance, and now we are basically looking at, like, almost every department, right? How do we help engineering teams, right? Find right information, from Confluence and, other sources, right? And how do
Yeah, I
we?
think I mean that definitely resonates. I think at Cohere we've built a lot of bots internally, and like the first team to really like have one up and running is the IT team. So they've basically automated a lot of like question answering and like the IT support channel. So yeah, that tracks.
So yeah, I think so in this context, basically, if you look at how do we use Cohere and where do we use Cohere? I saw one of the, I think attendee asked that. So there are like four. So if you look at the typically AI products, right? Especially the modern AI products, which are like built-in AI, right? Not just like a chatbot that was built on top of existing software. So there are like four areas where you essentially we apply AI, right? So the first area where we basically apply is, hey, we have a lot of information and somebody is asking a question. How do we summarize it, right? The second thing is, hey, user is asking for, hey, I need my payslip for last month. Instead of asking, hey, last month means, is it June? Is it May? Is it, July? You can detect, right? Last month means, okay, it's June because we know what time zone the end user is in. Then you slot fill that into, whatever your automation program is, right? And the third thing is, how do you do, the smart routing based on what kind of intent should be mapped to what kind of teams, right? What is an IT intent? My laptop is slow is like an IT intent. I need payroll support is like either a finance intent or a HR intent, right? And so, or like in a conference room, the projector is not working, is basically a workplace or a facilities issue, right? So that's like third area. The fourth area is basically when we identify these intents, how do we do the right tool selection, right? So when somebody says payroll and the customer has enabled ADP as a payroll system, now how do I go to ADP and pick up the pay stub so that I can give it to end user, right? So these are like the four areas if you look at from an end user perspective. If you look from a company perspective, now you need to organize your information into vector databases, right? So you need to do embedding of information. Some cases you might not want to index all the information, right? That's where like we are like big fans of Cohere tools and this whole no index approach, right? So you go, get the information because there is no reason for you to index your entire Salesforce data, for example, right? Somebody asks, so what's the status of this account? You can go hit Salesforce API, get that information, then, apply a re-ranker to pick the right segment and then provide that as a response to end users, right? So I think in these pipelines, I think all these areas is where we kind of apply Cohere models and AI models, and we can double click on them as well.
That's super fascinating. I mean, that's a very yeah, I mean that's a lot of steps in the pipeline. I'm curious how you guys are managing sort of all these LLM calls and like, making it robust and even just setting user expectations.
Yeah. No, I think great question. So basically, I think one of the biggest challenges with building AI-driven automation or modern AI products is when do you like there are like bunch of new user experience patterns that we need to basically implement, right? Like traditionally search, when you do a search, I mean lexical search, essentially you are just retrieving, whatever is matching, right? When you are basically doing a semantic search, you are not only retrieving information, but you're also there could be use cases where the end customer might not want you to rephrase, right? Example, like in case of certain HR policies or financial policies, right? You don't want it to be rephrased. You still need to apply AI to detect, what's the span of the answer, so you can extract the right answer and give it to the end user. And now the challenge is there are like multiple user experience patterns we have to implement, Ivan. So one user experience pattern that we have to implement is what's the source from which we have generated or summarized this answer, right? And provide this ability for customers to decide, do you want to use summarization or you just want us to do span extraction from your knowledge bases? If there is an FAQ already created in your Confluence or SharePoint, do we really want to regenerate that answer? Right? Or expose that as a verified answer. The third pattern that we had to implement is tell users that, okay, this is coming and generated by an AI model, and what is the source and what's the confidence level of that source, right? And the fourth thing is sometimes, we might not be able to detect and map the intents of end users, just like I have given this example of, somebody says, I have a tax query around my payroll. Now, should you send that to a finance team versus HR team? You might want to basically say, hey, do you mean in this context of last month's payroll, or do you mean in the context of the overall taxes for the year, right? If overall taxes for the year, maybe like reach out to finance team. Otherwise, like how do you, deal with the ambiguity? So the space is evolving. Obviously, we are looking at how other people are approaching. What's the right way for the end user, to provide and lead with confidence. So in that context, we kind of like came up with our own framework called trust, which is how can we be transparent? How can we be responsible? How do we explain it to the end user in terms of understanding what we are doing, where we are doing it, and why we have took that path, and provide admin users the ability to trace things, right? So then they can understand why model did this way in this context, so that then they can either work with us or themselves tune in our case things like segments, things like intents, right? And things like routing rules and whatnot.
Yeah, it really seems like if you're building a product today,
Mhm.
deciding how much humans should be involved in the loop is a bit of an art.
Yeah.
And I imagine that sort of, plays into some of the adoption dynamics, right? Like, how do you make, or how do you convince your users that, hey, like this is a tool to help you to help you do your job better rather than to, automate your job away? Like, do you have those sort of,
Yeah.
um, discussions and you have to address those kind of concerns?
Yeah. So I think one of the that's actually a great question. So I think the design pattern that we basically took was human in the loop is very critical because it is possible that the models could misclassify, right? And it is possible we generated an answer, but also provide help for end user to get to somebody in the team, right? Not just like make it like, okay, you're asking something, you got something, you're not happy with it, don't force like, another, AI assistant generated answer on the end user, right? So I think we even wrote about it in one of our blog about some of these design patterns, saying, like, how did we build the assistant for people? I saw like some people asking that question. So we actually wrote about what it takes to build an enterprise AI assistant, right? So what are the architectural patterns that you need to follow? I think we published some of the design patterns, and we are also planning to publish, and we did some collaboration. Actually, Greg Cameron has worked with not just us, a bunch of companies building, around AI assistants and, a couple of other AI use cases to prepare a report around what are the good user patterns that we can implement to give a confidence that people know that I can get to a human. Where do you bring human in the loop, right? And where you should apply AI and where you should not apply AI, right? I think one of my fundamental belief is AI is a tool, it's not an oracle, right? So don't expect it to be like an oracle doing everything for you. But it's a tool that can do quite a few powerful things.
One of the most asked about questions, at least from us dealing with enterprises, and even looking at our chat today, is hallucinations.
Yeah.
How do we deal with hallucinations?
Yeah.
Vijay, I'm curious how you think about hallucinations in your sort of user workflows and how you've sort of built features around it and solved for that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, look, I mean, hallucination is a great thing in if you're generating an image, if you're generating a poem, like some use cases, it's like a very powerful and useful feature, but in an enterprise context, it may not be useful feature at all, right? So somebody asks, hey, what's our uh, vacation policy, right? You don't want to like make things up and provide them, right? So I think you really have to understand the tolerance for failure and the level of accuracy you need in use cases, Ivan. So in our case, we generally tell people that while RAG helps to mitigate this to a great extent, we also try to basically implement both the output validators, right? So the output validators is basically, if you look at in our AI pipeline, so there are guardrails before we process prompts, and then we go hit these models, and run tools and do information extraction, summarization, and whatnot. And before we share that back to end users, we also apply output guardrails. So this output guardrails could be around do we want to serve this or just ask user to click here to get a human help, right? Now the tricky part is you can't do this 100% reliably, in certain cases, especially around HR use cases and legal use cases. In our product context, we encourage people to use the verified AI approach, right? Which is basically feed, we generate the FAQs, you look at it, and the admin teams basically say good, 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 good. Whatever variations of questions, you always go back and bring that, right, rather than trying to rephrase and re-summarize or come up with an answer. In case of IT, right, I think it's okay to have some level of hallucination, but there we again took a design pattern approach of when do we hallucinate. Let's say one classic example is you go on a random internet, ask, somebody might have written how to reset, let's say, Zoom password, right? Somebody would have said, just go uninstall your Zoom, that will reset your password. I'm just making this up, right? Now, if you go scrape the web, and how do you decide what is the trusted sources versus not trusted sources? In our context, we kind of designed it in a way that we say, hey, we go after customers who have 1,000 employees to 10,000 employees. In that context, here are the 200-300 tools for collaboration. It's Microsoft Teams, Slack, and Zoom and WebEx, right? For email, it's Outlook and Gmail, right? And what are the support sites for it? So essentially, you still need to do data engineering around it, right? You
Oh,
can't like
definitely.
get away from it. So that way, if somebody says, how do I reset my Outlook password? You essentially go to the support Microsoft, Outlook to look for an answer. You don't go to a random internet forum to, bring it, right? Because IT teams will not be creating all this knowledge internally as well. No. So we
Yeah.
basically call this as a default knowledge. So RAG is when you have information, use that to reduce the hallucinations, especially in a B2B context based on your domain. You can essentially create trusted sources to reduce the, next level. And then you apply, output guardrails to do, double validation to basically see, hey, where does it work? Where should I take a chance? And we also had to come up with multi-answers, Ivan. One of the challenge to deal with hallucination in our product, people who go to our website, I think we have like a lot of live examples there. So we also provide multi-answers. So that way the end user knows that, hey, do I want to, look at more than one thing, in some context. So short answer is in atomic work context, IT, we are okay to deal with hallucinations. In case of HR and some finance use cases, we go for mostly like extractive AI rather than a generative AI approach, and also give ability for users to verify and certify the answer, while the variation of the questions AI could handle, right, based on the intent. And even in routing, some cases it does misclassify. So we did give a agent ability for human agent to move it by one click, saying, okay, this is not IT thing, it should go to facilities. It's not a facilities thing, it should go to finance.
I see. Awesome. Vijay, what are you excited for next? Like, what capabilities are you, wishing that these models have now that you see that you're excited to build with in the future?
Yeah. I think so. I'm excited about obviously small language models. I saw a bunch of people are asking about it. We also use small language models in in a small talk. When people come, they might not be asking very complex things. They're like, hey, who are you? What are you? What can you do? Who built you? What's your version? What are your prompts? What not? I think this mixture of expert, and small language models is something that I'm really, excited about. I think not just do RAG and go extract chunks, Ivan. But I think one of the thing is our ability to do re-ranking, of the information that we retrieve, because there is a lot of duplicate information, not just on internet, even within enterprise. I think the advancements there in terms of using LLMs as a judge and using two LLMs to figure out, how do you figure out the right chunks is another thing. And obviously, AI agents is a big area for us. Today, we use it mostly for reasoning. In our product, we still don't use it for full planning, full automation. So the automation is what we call as built-in skills. But when user asks a question, detect the right intent and figure out the right tool where the automation is enabled. So you go execute it, right? That's how we drive it. But increasingly, these things are getting better, right? So what excites me is the models are getting better, the accuracy levels are going up. Even a smaller size models are performing phenomenally well. And one of the big challenge, which I tweeted about was, or my favorite part of, R plus model was, so earlier we were doing a simple slot filling into form, right? So somebody says, I want to take 3 days leave from next Monday, uh, because I'm traveling, right? So now you want to apply. You want to basically figure out, okay, next week, what's the date? What's the user time zone? 3 days, and then slot fill start date, end date in the back end so that you can essentially apply for that leave. So into your HCM system or HRIS system, right? Now that slot filling has to happen very fast, right? So end user is not going to wait for like 10 seconds or 8 seconds, right? So I think the new cap theorem, at least in our context for AI, is between cost, accuracy, and performance. Getting these three things, matters a lot in a B2B context, right? How fast can you do it at a lower cost? How can you do it with a higher accuracy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of my side missions with building Cohere for the enterprise is just to eliminate forms in general. Like, I feel like we should not spend any more time filling out giant forms. Like, AI should just do it for us. Cool. I think that's the end of the conversations session. But I'd love to open it up and answer any questions folks might have. Please submit to the Q&A.
I think, yeah. So I see like a bunch of questions. One question somebody asked is, help us understand how Atomicwork is using Cohere and why Cohere. I think I have answered this briefly, but I think Ivan also touched upon it. If you look at AI, so there is this frontier AI, there is this enterprise AI. So we basically felt Cohere is like very focused on this enterprise AI mission. That was one of the reasons why we have bet on them. And we also basically felt, they are building all the building blocks that are required for enterprise AI use cases. Okay, how are we different from traditional ITSM and ESM? In our context, think of it like instead of asking people to go find support, how do you bring support to end users? So that's what modern service management is, right? Ivan, I think there's a question for you. Can you help us tell us more about why you are bullish about Cohere in this hype cycle, and how are you differentiating from other big players?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm obviously super excited and bullish about Cohere. We just announced our Series D, which gives us, more compute and data and whatnot. But in terms of differentiators, I mean, the cool thing about these models is that you can now pour sort of human behavior into them. So once you do this initial pre-training phase of teaching it about the world and all that, then you can actually specialize them towards human behavior. And what we do differently, and like one of the benefits of focusing on enterprise, is that we can then hire specifically like business humans to actually teach our models how to behave in business contexts. So our biggest differentiator is actually just our focus on the enterprise use case and deploying into enterprise environments. So the model sizes that we target are going to be for, what's the largest model that fits on hardware that enterprise can actually procure these days, so that enterprises can actually adopt this technology in a completely data secure air gap setting, so that none of the data leaks and CSOs can be happy.
Got it. Yeah, I think there was a question around input-output guardrails and how much impact it has on a speed and cost. So obviously, folks, like if you are if you're intercepting your prompt, trying to apply guardrails, so it's going to add to latency, and I mean, it's going to add to some cost as well. So there are a couple of good libraries out there. So you can look at either Shreya's guardrails or Nemo guardrails from NVIDIA, and Microsoft has a bunch of things, and most LLM so also could be used to validate and verify, right? So for example, you can use LLM itself to detect whether a user prompt is like a safe prompt or unsafe prompt, right? And I think there is another question, Ivan, probably you can look at it. This is if enterprises start deploying agentic systems, what do you see as a practical approach to managing complexity and observability when it comes to complex workflows?
So I think this is a very fun question. I think everyone needs to start logging everything. And then you can sort of have another agent sort of understand these logs as they come in. Because, definitely there's not going to be or it's going to be very difficult for you to like write, a backend service to detect certain things. I think it's much more tenable to actually just have another agent sort of tackle the observability of another agent, and feeding it sort of this like stream of logs to reason over. And it's actually not that impossible now with long context lengths.
Yeah, that's true. And also, like a lot of tooling is being built, folks, especially around distributed trace, across different LLMs, and tracking, latencies, and having LLM routers, so that you need a distributed trace. I think tooling is getting better. Hopefully, it will get better even more. I think there's a question from Max about talk about personally identifiable information and managing around that with LLM. So this is where Max was referring to input and output guardrails. So you essentially want to apply data privacy things, before you process, before you send, let's say, data to LLM. So there's like good libraries again. Look at Microsoft Presidio, and is one good library around data privacy. There are a bunch of others as well. I'm just like name dropping whatever we use, and top of my mind, doesn't mean any endorsement, but you can look at what works for your needs. And so that way you can basically make sure that you're not sending any personal information to LLMs. And also the good thing with Cohere is you can run the models in your Azure cloud or AWS cloud, host them. So that way you're not worried about, hey, am I sending entire information to a commonly shared model, which may be learning from all this data, right?
Yeah, and on the point about PII, like from my experience, the models are actually kind of decent at anonymizing stuff. So if you have a piece of data, you can actually prompt the model and say, hey, look at this piece of data. Can you remove all the potential PII entities from it? And and you can say like, oh, replace it with, capital name or something like that, or just replace the name with something natural. And it's pretty good at that these days.
So there's a question from Omar around how do you recommend to clients which workflow is the first best one to tackle out of the gate? Umar, I don't have a direct answer for you, but what I would basically say is where can you tolerate failure, where it is okay to deal with little less accuracy, probably a good AI use case for you to try out, right? Especially if you're looking at workflow automation, password reset is a great use case to use AI to automate that. Because if you look at like most internal IT tickets in 1,000 people company, I think 10 to 20% of them around account unlock, password reset, account access, right? So I think those three could be even today could be reliably automated. Uh, so will the questions from all the questions from Zoom Q&A will be answered? I think folks, we are trying to answer some questions. If there are others, probably we can get back. So what about using Atomicwork for helping project managers? So Amir, this is not really built for project managers kind of a use case. But if it is about finding information, I think Atomicwork does help you, in that context. Um, and okay,
I'm actually
let's
curious
see.
about this one. What RAG framework do you build on top of?
Uh, okay, so you're asking, is that a question from somebody, Ivan, or
Yeah,
you're
it's from the
asking?
Q&A.
Oh,
Yes,
it's
but
Q&A.
I'm curious as well.
Yeah. I think so folks, so we have, I think, written about this. If you search for Atomicwork Enterprise AI Assistant architecture, you essentially have all these details. But to give you, we use a vector database. We built a LLM router. That's what we kind of have done, because there were like not many open source routers in 2022 when we started, and even early 2023. We basically, we use BM25, along with semantic search as well. Because in enterprises, you have use cases where both of them are needed. We use Cohere Reranker model. We use for embeddings, we use multiple models along with Cohere. And for generation, again, based on uh, use case, we use different models kind of an approach. So what pattern you want to apply depends on a couple of your use cases, but basically, look, you need LLMs, you need embedding model, you need re-ranker, you need vector database, and you might need even a vector database that also supports the BM25. Okay, I don't know, Ivan, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like your very typical RAG stack, and I think the space will continue to develop. So and it definitely depends on like what your users' problems are. And I think that affects the sort of like later stages of the pipeline and how you massage
Yeah,
the outputs and stuff like that.
got
Um, oh, and I'm curious about this. I like this question. Vijay, are you thinking about multimodal? What sort of use cases do you see in automation with multimodal?
No, I think a couple of use cases, right? So typically people say, send us screenshots when they reach out to support is one, where you might want to, extract and interpret those images, or, the short videos that somebody has recorded. And in enterprise context, there is not much. So one of the thing that we have not built, but it's on roadmap is instead of telling user to read 10 instructions, can you turn them into a 30-second kind of a video, right? Step one, go to step two, step three, like map out with screenshots. So we have not done yet, but while we do process images, we process documents, we process documents with images, images with a lot of information, sometimes even tables kind of a thing. I think multimodal has use cases, even in a B2B kind of a context. I think it has a lot more use cases in a B2C context.
Cool. And how are you thinking about corporate security, right? Like people uploading, files that they have access to at one point, and perhaps they lose access to it later. Like, how do you think about it in terms of building for those kind of scenarios?
I think it's a great question, folks. While I said, look, we go connect to enterprise knowledge bases, allow people to query that information. But let's say we also respect the source permission. So let's say you have restricted access to some SharePoint document to, bunch of users. When somebody queries, if we find a chunks coming from the document, we also basically say, does this user have access? If not, don't give them access, right? Now, there are multiple ways we also allow businesses to customize them. So we have this design pattern called segments. Think of it like user groups. By default, we take your HR directory, we figure out who are employees, who are contractors, who is in engineering, who is manager, who is executive, who is in sales. So that way we can automatically segment and say, okay, everybody in engineering, if a Confluence says, it's for engineering group, okay, you allow access, right? Now, this is where, look, while AI models are getting better, if you're solving a specific use case problem, you still need to do quite a bit of engineering around it, right? If you look at SaaS, it is uh, access control, configuration, data engineering and integrations, and then AI. That's how you basically build AI native SaaS product, right?
Okay, this one I really like this one as well. So have you ever worked with a user who felt, threatened and like about the potential of Atomicworks? And how do you sort of manage those expectations and relationships?
So I think we do get into these conversations, to be honest. But think about this, right? My favorite example is, I think early 70s in United States, there were like close to 500,000 tellers in working in banks who used to hand out cash to people, right? You go to bank to withdraw cash. There were like almost 500,000 of them, who used to work. There were no ATMs, right? Now, 2025, we have 500,000 ATMs in just United States, and there are probably like 700,000 or 600,000 ATM tellers, right? So it's not like the jobs have gone away, right? But the thing is, a bank which could only have 20 branches, if they put ATMs, they could be in like all states, right? Or all counties, right? I think with the AI, the power of productivity is you could actually do better business and more business. Doesn't mean you do the same business with less people, right? So the thing you should be concerned is if a business is thinking I'm going to use technology, not grow my business, just reduce people, those businesses anyway will not survive as a business for very long, right? The motive of business is like, how can I grow and grow very productively, grow efficiently. I think that's what this technology can enable. I'm like a techno optimist. I don't think humans. We have employed probably highest number of humans in 2025 in entire human history, despite all the technology that we invented so far. And I think we are going to employ. And I would love, why not have, most of us, especially in tech industry, have more than 40-hour work weeks, right? Why not use AI and have 30-hour work weeks, you know? So
Yeah, and even like I think I've noticed like a shift in how companies are built nowadays as well. And you really notice a difference between a company that's built after the whole like AI assistant wave compared to before, right? Like I feel like there's a lot more software engineers enabled by these AI assistants now. And people don't think about just one, slice of the stack that they work on. It's like, well, if I want to work on this part, like I can, work with the AI assistant to actually learn this new part of the stack as well. So I'm pretty excited about, the future of work and like how, that looks like with AI. Cool. I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you everyone for your fun questions and your attention.
yeah, thank you everyone. Great questions. So if we could not answer all your questions, I don't know. Anyway, we're planning to, essentially post few more blogs from Atomicwork side to share a little bit more knowledge around, design patterns and guardrails. So look out for that. Thank you.